Hey guys, this is actually King of Horizon Esports, and I'm joined by Mikyx. Still waking up. The support of G2
Hello.
Esports. I do realize it's 10 a.m. in Europe, by the way, but yeah, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
A bit tired,
Uh
but that's about it. Yeah.
huh. Where are you guys based right now? I just like see a lot of like G2 related stuff going on in the background.
We're just chilling in Berlin in our gaming house. Yeah.
Ah, and I also know that like in Europe, a lot of teams from NA have already moved there, and the scrims have just started going. How has everything been going? Like, how is the prep? How is like the overall vibe? How is the team feeling, etc., etc.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we had so far maybe 3 or 4 days of scrims, and then one day of like workshop where we just talked. So yeah, so far it's been all right. I think we've been figuring out the patch slowly but surely. So yeah, I think in few days we're gonna move to the Riot hotels, and then yeah, it's gonna be nice to have like a change of scenery because right now we're just kind of playing from the same place as we're playing the whole year, so it doesn't actually feel as like as Worlds started basically. But yeah, I'm looking forward to just moving and having this change of scenery.
Yeah, like when I was doing a lot of interviews during the COVID era, some players told me that it was really difficult for them to get in the zone because they're playing matches in the same place that they kind of play solo queue or scrims. Do you think the scenery actually makes a big change in terms of mindset or even performance?
I think so, yeah. I think if you play from like the same place for the whole year, it's hard to make that switch where like, oh, something is different now. Like it was even similar when we just went to move to Munich for the season finals. It felt a lot different, like the whole atmosphere. So yeah, I think for sure it makes a difference.
You said that you've been figuring out the patch. How would you say that the overall bot lane meta has been? I know that they tried to nerf the mid AD carry and then it just kind of backfired, and now we ended up seeing a lot
Yeah.
of mages in ADC instead of what they were really intending to do. So they kind of rolled it back. Maybe lane swaps are not completely gone, but maybe less than before. So a little bit of changes, but for bot
Yeah.
lane specifically, how would you describe the meta?
I would say it's kind of similar. I think, yeah, at least for support, I feel like I'm kind of playing the same champions. Like, yeah, maybe there's like a little bit of variety because you're not like jailed to just play only engage tanks because junglers are not just only AP carry junglers. Because before you had to play like some kind of frontline for your AP jungler carry. Now it's a bit more open in that regard. Um, that's nice. I like to have more freedom in what I pick instead of just, the same three champions over and over again. But yeah, that's gotta change.
When I said on Twitter that I'm gonna do this interview, G2 was saying, "Yeah, how is your Nautilus? Are you gonna play Nautilus?
And not as good as ever.
Are you good as ever?"
I
Yeah.
even I even got some. Well, I got the game in Champions Queue with the people, so it was like we had a
Oh,
good review. So now it's like the
yeah.
best in the world after the reviews.
May I also mention that I was doing an interview with you on the Korean community, so half the comments were like, "Are you gonna play Halo Blaze, Poppy?" Because like I think you actually traumatized a lot of Korean fans.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's LOP, yeah. But yeah, actually, I noticed a lot of people play Poppy, but not many people play Halo Blades. At least not in like LCK, LPL. Everyone plays Aftershock, which is fine, I think. But I think sometimes you can just get away with playing Halo Blades. I think, yeah, it's not like, yeah, it just feel like they always go Aftershock no matter what. Even though I think Halo Blades can give you a lot of early game power. But yeah,
I guess it's like, oh, having that expected stable role versus having that more like an edge power, like being able to surprise the enemy during the lane phase. I guess
yeah,
that's like a content pros, I guess.
probably, yeah. They're just more scared when they
Yeah,
play Poppy. You
yeah.
have to, you have to have no fear. You just get in there and one shot someone.
uh, so here we are, getting ready for Worlds. I think everything will feel a bit more real when we start having, Worlds anthem and Worlds trailers, and players start moving to their hotels, and also agents teams will start flying into Europe sometime around the end of this month. And I'm just wondering what the vibe is like because a lot of people are almost wanting a run back of 2019. Perhaps the signs are there. It's being held in Europe. The teams that are attending are quite similar, but I don't know what your overall thoughts or even like confidence level are going into this World.
Um, I mean, I think my confidence level is pretty high because at least I got some confidence during MSI that like in that tournament we could win against every team depending on the day, and even on stage we showed some good games. I think even when we got 3-0 by T1, I think we still had good like early game leads in all three games that we could definitely close out if we were better. And I feel like we worked on that. So if we get leads now, I think we'll be way better at closing them. And also the way we drafted, I think, is better now. I think we have a few more options than before. So yeah, I think, and also I watched like LCK LPL finals a lot, like or just like their playoffs. So that also gave me more confidence that we're like not as bad as everyone else has, or like at least not as bad compared to LCK LPL because there's also a lot of mistakes over there when I was watching. So that gave me a lot of confidence as well. They were like, "Oh, nice." What everyone is saying, like everyone is actually just a little bit delusional in terms of like how bad the level is in Europe compared to the other regions, because I feel like it's maybe a bit worse in like certain like mechanical aspects, but just like how they play on the map is not that, different.
Yeah, I guess like, for example, I think Genji versus Hana Life Esports finals was pretty high quality. Then there were series like DK versus T1 where I was like,
Oh yeah.
being really honest, like, on a good day, FlyQuest might stomp either of them.
Maybe, yeah. I could see that.
So you think the biggest gap between Asian teams and West right now is like individual mechanics? Because there are so many different opinions. Some
I
people
would
say,
say
"Oh,
so.
okay." Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, just like looking at their games, and like even though they sometimes have a few misplays here and there mechanically, most of the time they play it quite well, like all the situations, all the team fights or skirmishes, and they just find better windows to start fights compared to Europe. Like for especially like in our game 3, I think it was in the final of season finals. Like the first 10 minutes of the game was like complete abomination mechanically. Like everyone was like missing everything, like complete like free win in fights. It was just like how somehow we misplayed it and found a way to lose it. Um, so yeah, comparing that, it was definitely not great. But yeah, I feel like that's the biggest one. Like I feel like just moving around the map or like lane allocations and all that, I think we do quite well compared to all the other teams as well. So yeah, I think the biggest part would probably be skirmishes, power player situations, all that.
When people, again, going back to 2019 G2, people obviously remember it as a very strong team. Like when Korean fans and players talk about the West, that's still the name that comes up. Oh, I remember watching 2000 G2, and I think one of their strengths was also being able to control the lanes and macro in a way that the Asian teams could not expect. Would you say that this strength is something that you and Caps have specifically?
I would say if we have that specifically in terms of macro, I feel like in 2019 we were all very aware of how to play around the whole map or just how to play on 3 lanes. And I think a lot of teams were actually not very smart about that, about how to just play the whole map, like especially against T1, I remember was a good example in 2019. They just had to group for every Drake no matter what. Like even if they were like behind or like the sidelines were bad, they just had to contest the Drake. So we just gave it, and then we pushed sides, and then they lost a lot of farm for that, a lot of XP, and then we just kept being stronger and stronger throughout the game. I think a lot of that was also thanks to Duff. Like he also noticed that pattern in them, so we kind of used it even more. And now he's also the one that also taught us a lot about how we should play the map, like all the macro concepts that we didn't really know last year, it felt like. But yeah, I think what me and Caps bring is more just like the creativity. So like we can go a step further from just normal playing side lanes 1v1s and just pushing the limits of what we can do with our champions, like more like champion specific stuff, I guess. Yeah, that's what we are good at.
Yeah, for Korean fans who are not aware, Duffman has joined G2 once again coming into 2024. So that's definitely a strength that we should possibly fear going into Worlds.
Correct.
By the way, how did it feel like beating T1 back in 2019?
Oh, it felt very nice. Especially because like the crowd was very wild as well. Like the whole stage was shaking when we were like winning and stuff like this. And yeah, I mean, it just felt insane. Especially like at MSI, I think it was already very hype. And then again at Worlds, and the way we won as well, where it was like kind of a comeback in Game 4. I remember the one fight in our base. Yeah, it just felt kind of insane because that just made us qualify for the World Finals, which is like a pretty big thing. And yeah, I think also back in the day, our scrims were not going that great at the time. So it felt a bit crazy that we just won. Because yeah, it felt like in scrims, no matter what we did, we just couldn't win many games. I still remember, like, I think we played IG, and I was playing, like, we played Syndra bot lane. I think we played Syndra Nautilus, and they ganked us, and we killed them 3v2. I'm like, okay, nice, this is the game we win. And then we lost anyway. I was like, how? Like, what do we have to do? What more do we have to do to win? But then, yeah. Anyway, I guess we work on stage usually.
Yeah, I remember the crowd back at it was like the Spanish stadium that was supposed to be like a bullfight. And then, wow, like, yeah, it is. So. Yeah, it was like 90% of people chanting G2. Of course, it was Europe, and it was one of the most craziest crowd that I've ever seen.
I just remember they did the lights thing, like when there was like 2-1 or something. Like usually when a team is two games up, then they start doing the lights. Like it's really cool to see from the seats.
Is it an extra motivation, or perhaps even a hope that you once again be playing in front of a European crowd who is known to be very supportive, very loud, and very energetic?
Yeah, I think it's like a pretty nice thing to have, because that means my family might also come watch, here and there. So that's nice. Usually if it's like too far, they like CBA. So that's a nice thing. And yeah, last time it was in Europe, it felt pretty insane, like Spain and France in particular. So looking forward to that. I guess the Swiss stage might not be as many fans as as usual, since it's in the Berlin studio. It's gonna be maybe not as many people, but that gives us more motivation to qualify for the other ones, where it's gonna be a bigger crowd. So yeah, for sure, it's nice.
Yeah, is LSC studio that small? I've never been to the new one.
Yeah, it's quite.
Oh, you cut out.
200 people or less.
Okay.
Now in the studio.
Yeah.
Probably less, honestly, now that I think about it. But yeah.
It's pretty tiny.
A little bit, yeah.
Would it be weird to play in France again? Because I know that Europeans.
It's fine.
Because I know that for Europeans, 2019 G2 is one of the happiest memory they've ever had, but also that FPX versus G2 was quite painful.
That was quite painful, yeah. But it has to be a redemption arc in Paris, so should be fine. At least now we've learned from our mistakes. Yeah, we just learned from all the stuff we did wrong back in 2019 in Paris, because we just were not really being ourselves. So yeah, this time will be better.
Was that mistake you're talking about, not being able to pace yourself and also stressing out a bit too much and feeling possibly burned out going towards finals? Because I think that's kind of the message that I got.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah, because a lot of the things were just overthinking way too hard and just like making just stupid plans, when in reality, if we just play what we've always been playing and just like do what we're good at, we'd probably just have a way better chance of winning. I would probably not have to be fancy and play like Pike mid or something into Nautilus. We could just play like normal stuff. And it'd probably be better.
Yeah.
And just the way we played didn't make too much sense.
Okay, in your defense, like FPX was also doing really crazy stuff like Malphite mid and Nautilus mid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's true. I mean,
yeah,
we had to have something ready for it,
yeah.
but we could have just played like normal stuff into it that would, and then play around like, if they want to gank, maybe counter gank, and then probably it's gonna be, winnable. Or just like when they split map and off top, should probably dive bot in return, something like that. But we just didn't really do anything. Yeah, it just didn't make much sense.
You know what's crazy? Like, I know that this is a sentiment that I feel that a lot of the fans also share. I always end up believing in G2. Like, I can't explain it. Even when, like, G2 does look a shaky, like, even if, like, their finals didn't look as perfect, I almost have this weird feeling that they're gonna upset someone or go very, very far. And G2 keeps proving that is the case too. What is the strength? Like, what is this mysterious force? I know this is like a similar question that I previously gave, but I don't know. It always makes me curious. C9 didn't make it to Worlds. Like, teams go up and down. Team Liquid didn't win LCS finals. Genji didn't win the LCK finals. But G2 somehow always wins LEC finals, and G2 somehow always like makes an upset at Worlds. What is this mysterious force? Can you try describing it? What's happening?
It's a good question. I think probably a lot of it has to do with caps, at least like Europe-wise. I think there's not many mid laners that are as good, so they can't really match up and be better than him and take over games. But internationally, it's like a little bit more difficult in that regard. So yeah, I mean, I think usually, we have some innovative strategies as well for like international tournaments. So that's maybe why people have more hope in us, because usually we always, get some leads here and there, have some hope. Like for example, this MSI against T1 felt quite close, I think, in our games. Even last year at Worlds, where I thought we were kind of bad, we still won against Damwon one game, against Weibo one game. Against Genji, maybe not so much. We kind of got stomped. BLG, similarly. But at least there was hope in the beginning. So, I'm not sure. At least I guess we have a decent track record. That's probably why it's a bit more expected for us to do well. Yeah, I would say that's probably the main part. Because people don't expect much from Mad Lions because they didn't have the best track record so far in the world tournaments or play-ins, for that fact.
Did Mad Lions ever get out of play-ins?
I think maybe once.
Maybe? I don't think so.
Because, in 2021, they had to go, they were first seed, right? So they kind of went straight there. Yeah. But I guess the 2 times they went to play-ins, they both times lost, I believe. I think so.
Shit.
Something like that. I think they can make it this time, though.
Do you think so? How come? There's some pretty strong teams there, and then 100 Thieves.
Yeah, but I feel like Mad Lions is quite good themselves, and they're also very innovative. And I just feels like they are trying their best to make it. I feel like in the other iterations, they're maybe not trying as hard. From the stories I've heard, they're maybe just like kind of chilling and hoping for the best. Yeah. But I think this time around, they're not hoping for the best. They're actually doing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I like them. They're pretty motivated. They have ambition. They're ambitious. I like that.
Yeah. I like that as well.
So how far is G2 going this time?
I know, I'd like to say all the way, because I feel like if we don't go all the way this year, then I don't know what year we're gonna go all the way. Like, I feel like this is their best chance to actually win it. So, yeah, I kind of said similar last year, but I wasn't actually aware how bad we actually were in terms of just like macro. But now that we kind of fixed that part, I think I would like to believe that we're good enough to make it all the way with how creative we are and how much more on the same level we are with all the Eastern teams in terms of map movements. Like last year was really not comparable. We were just actually clueless. But at least we could match early games, and we could have some good early game plans compared to the other teams, but we didn't really translate them into anything else. And if we get behind, we just get stopped. So, but now I feel like we at least have comeback potential, I think we can be clutch in like late games moments. So yeah, I think this year should be a good one.
How you described last year is kind of interesting because I think the public sentiment is okay. We heard all the stories that G2 was like doing really well in scrims, and they also beat Weibo Gaming, who ended up going to finals, and they just had really bad day against NRG, possibly some of the players being sick. But you just seem to
Yeah.
think that the team just wasn't ready for international tournament overall.
I mean, I guess, yeah, I think just compared to the other top 4 teams that actually made it to like semis and stuff, I think we were not as good for sure. I think we would not win against them at any point on any given day. I think we could win against NRG on a different day, but even they had like a way better idea of how they wanna play their like even just objective fights. Like for example, game 2, I think a lot of it just came down to like dragon fights where they just completely outplayed us, or just like they had a way better position. We didn't punish them, even if we were first at the objective. We just kind of let them walk in for free, not doing any damage. Everyone was just kind of AFKing. Like even on side lanes, we were just AFK getting caught perma. So it felt like we weren't actually doing anything. There was no plans, no anything. So yeah, in that sense, for sure, it didn't feel like looking back at it, it didn't feel like we could actually win against anyone. Like even if we got to quarters, probably just get 3-0 and go home. And that is also the reason why I was talking to Duff about this, and that's the reason why I wanted to get him on board for this year, because he was the one that actually pointed out all the mistakes we were doing and how clueless we were. So I was like, okay, that is a bit wild, yeah. But I think in scrims, a lot of the times we were just like playing very well early game, so the games kind of felt easier because in scrims, a
Yeah.
lot of teams just tilt or they just want to remake as soon as something goes wrong or they're behind.
Yeah.
So I guess a lot of our wins came from that. Like a lot of our days during Worlds was like we play maybe like 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the game. We do like a good dive bot lane. They ask for remake. We're like no, and then like okay, then we go next game. And the next game, if something same happens, another 10 minutes game. And then if you do 3 games like that, we're done in like 1 or 2 hours. And then people just go play solo queue, and that's it. Because yeah, I guess the arrangements were maybe a bit different because a lot of the Eastern teams just wanted to play like 6 games instead of playing for 6 hours. Because usually in Europe we just play like 6 hours, you know. And if you can get more games in than 6, then you play more games. But there it felt just like, oh yeah, just 6 games and that call it a day. So yeah, for sure the practice didn't feel as useful as it could have been. For sure we had like most of the scenarios we could practice was if we were behind in early game, then we could make comeback or make like have like an actual normal game. But a lot of times if we were just ahead, if you get like a good dive of early game, good game plan, then enemy team just like FF. Then I was like, okay, nice. And then also a lot of teams kind of figured out our draft as well. With like the bans and the Kalista Draven bans was like, you know, pretty big one. That's also how a lot of our early dives came to fruition. So yeah, we started banning that. It also kind of took one of our, I guess, cheeses or strategies. So yeah, that was one of our ways to explore the game and win it.
Yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of teams told me that having a good win rate in scrims is not always a good thing. And when you do have like more than 60% win rate, you have to stop and ask yourself, are we doing something wrong?
yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, it also depends against which teams you have that kind of win rate. But I mean, usually if you're winning against the good teams, it should have a good meaning, I guess, because it means that the stuff you're working or the champions are playing make sense or they do work, because otherwise you probably wouldn't be able to lane or you would be able to just get far enough in the game to win it. But yeah, I think with losing you might learn more, because then you need to catch up to actually, not lose the next time. But yeah, I think uh, I mean, I think it's not actually very relevant if you win or lose the games, as long as you can win from as long as you can learn from winning as well, because there's for sure a lot of stuff to learn. Like if you just play mid games normally and it's like a 30-minute game, there's 100% stuff to learn, even in a winning game, as much as a losing game. Maybe the mistakes are more obvious in the losing game, but even in a winning game, it should be like possible to learn from it, as long as people have the knowledge to see what went wrong.
You know how you said, I hope that we can make it all the way? Maybe that's like the secret, because I recently went to LA and did a lot of interviews with the NA teams, and I love them a lot and I love the players, but the sentiment is, oh, it'll be cool if we can make it to quarterfinals and semifinals. And
Yeah.
G2 always aims for winning it all, and some people always blame, oh yeah, you guys are delusional, like, you know, you're not the 2019 G2, oh my god, stop giving us hope. But I think that's a very powerful thing in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so as well. And I think if people don't really like aspire to win everything, then I'm not really sure like what is the point of just like showing up just to participate. Like I think there is for sure like a notion that it's not winnable against like the top LCK LPL teams. But I mean, I think it just comes down to how well you know the game and see the mistakes they're doing. They're quite exploitable. And yeah, just like if you can figure out that it's not actually as big of a gap as you think it is, then for sure you're gonna think it's winnable. But I guess for our case, it's also a bit different because we've actually been to, well, very far in the tournament. So like if we make a World Finals once, it's not crazy to think, oh yeah, next year I'm gonna make it again, and the next year I'm gonna make it again, even if the next year you go out in Swiss and all that. Like even that year I believed we were gonna make it, but yeah. Sometimes delusion is what keeps you going as well.
It hurts, but the dopamine is so good when you do it.
That is true, yeah.
Like, I was like telling this to my friends, and maybe Korean fans won't like it, but I'll be really honest. As long as if there is one LCK team in semifinals, if I could choose the second team, I'd rather choose LEC than LCK.
Me too.
You kind of need it, because I think like people are
Yeah.
just losing hope in Europe, and that's why people loved it when you beat T1 and like was
Yeah.
saying that make Europe great again or something. Yeah, I think the scene kind of needs it.
Yeah, I think so too, yeah. Would be nice. It would be quite nice to, have some hope. So every year is not just like, oh yeah, doesn't matter who we send. It's just gonna be, top. The semifinal is gonna be full like LCK, LPL, and then yeah, one of them is gonna win it. Feels a bit boring to just have the same every year, yeah.
And this is my second to final question. And if you do make it all the way to finals once again, and if you go all the way to London with Lincoln Park playing, I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe you'll face a very strong LCK team or an LPL team. Maybe it's Hana there. Maybe it's Genji there. Maybe it's BLG, and everyone thinks that it's gonna be impossible. And then you win it and you lift the trophy. What would that moment mean for you?
Well, I guess it would mean that all the work I've put in was actually worth. I think, yeah, a lot of times it feels like if you work very hard and then don't even make it very far, it just feels like what was even the point? Especially like last year during Swiss, that was one of the years where it was like the most structured, I guess, or we put in the most effort into it. At least I did for like the whole from my whole career, and then my result was getting knocked out in Swiss. Like that felt very discouraging, I guess. So winning would make it so, it was actually worth it. Yeah, I guess that would be it for me. Yeah.
Any message to the G2 fans, the EU fans? There is, because even in Korea there is a lot of G2 fans, as you are already aware. Any final message? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to have everyone, like, I would like to give everyone hope, and yeah, I want them to keep supporting us and have high hopes because we have high hopes for ourselves and high expectations.
Hmm.
and I hope we can, live up to them for everyone watching. And yeah, that's it.
Any message to Keria?
I hope we get to play each other again, and this time he'll be going home.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I'm still sorting out my accommodation out, but hopefully I'll soon see you at Berlin, and hope you do well then.
Yeah, thank you.